Mr. Rauch, you've heard both the chair makes reference and the gentlelady from Massachusetts also made reference to the NEPA requirements and the conflict between the MSA and NEPA. I think though, I don't necessarily advocate that we do away with the NEPA requirements. You can understand the frustration, especially that the fishermen feel and others feel that have to deal with it, when in the 2006 MSA, basically NOAA was tasked with trying to resolve the conflict. I understood from your response to the chair that basically nothing's been done. I'm asking now, what exactly has been done? We may not have addressed it, but what have you done? And to really ignore a provision in an authorization act for this many years under a different administration, albeit, but still to ignore it, it's kind of difficult for those of us who want to support all of your efforts to sit there and say, well, from 2006 to now, that's a long period of time, and why hasn't it been done?
Thank you, Congresswoman, for that and for giving me the opportunity to address this. I think the last time this issue was addressed to Chairman Robbins, who offered his opinion about whether it had been done. I disagree. I think we have dealt with this. A little background on this issue. We've struggled historically with integrating the time frame requirements, the analytical requirements between NEPA and the Magnuson Act for some time. But in 2000, after we had lost a series of court cases on this, we devoted a substantial amount of financial resources and agency resources, both on our side and the council, to try to align the processes better. And we worked very hard on that. And so over that time, it is harder and harder to find any actual evidence of more than a theoretical conflict between the two statutes. It does require some increased analytical effort. It requires sometimes an increased time effort, but largely we've been able to mesh those two statutes. In response to the 2006 requirement by Congress, we initially did a proposed rule, which we put out for public comment and then subsequently withdrew, which would mesh the two provisions better. We then decided that we could do much of the same thing by putting out a policy statement about how the Magnuson Act and the NEPA provisions are supposed to apply together. We have implementing policies. We did that in last February, in February 2013, and as we said then, we thought that that had complied with the 2006 requirements. We are about to put that out for a further round of public review, recognizing it's a living document. And so in the coming months, I think you'll see another revision of that, because once we put it out, we talked to the councils, and the councils had some input they wanted to put into that process. And so we've taken that council input, and we'll be putting out a revision. But we believe we've complied with the 2006 mandate between NEPA and the Magnuson-Stevens Act.
Mr. Rauch, I guess my difficulty in understanding that is that you have NEPA, which is a law. You have MSA, which is a law. And to mesh two laws together, it doesn't seem to be logical that you can simply do it by a policy statement. It would seem that you would need a law to mesh two laws together to at least have some kind of force and effect. And I still don't understand. 2006 to 2013 is an awful long period of time to come up with a policy statement that's been put out, withdrawn, and now you're trying to convince me that what Congress has to accept is that a policy statement will mesh the MSA and NEPA. And again, I want to believe that there is a resolution to this. I just can't understand how a mere policy statement can then trump two statutes that have the kind of historic implementation that NEPA and MSA has.
Well, we're not trying to trump either statute. The two statutes do mesh together remarkably well as long as the councils and NOAA make an affirmative effort to do that. Both statutes require a consideration of a number of environmental impacts before you take actions. Both have timelines and public processes that inform decision makers. The real conflict comes, the only real conflict comes if it is not applied correctly, in that the minimum time for action under NEPA is the maximum time for action under the Magnuson Act. And so you have to move a lot of the NEPA processes down to the council level in order to meet those timeframes. So we're able to mesh them together without trying to trump each statute. It does take a little work, but as long as we are invested in the process and the councils are, we think that the two can be handled coherently.
Mr. Raj, I respectfully disagree that you can mesh it like that. Mr. Chair, I have some additional questions that I'd like to submit for the record, if that's okay.
They will be, and I'll make that announcement at the end of this panel. Thank the gentlelady
Thank you.
from Hawaii. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Alaska.